Hi, this is Connie Moser, and I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of Nights at the Round Table. My guest tonight is Don Scoggins. Hi, Don. How you doing?
Connie? Thanks very much for having me.
We're good. Oh, I'm looking forward to it because we are going to ad-lib it all tonight. So I'm just going to start off, if you don't mind, give me a little short bio and tell me how you got to be here in Virginia.
Well, I came to Virginia by way of Washington, D.C. in 1972 when I came back from Vietnam. I located in Washington. I was the urban planner for the district government for about 6 years. And well, I was there I actually lived in D.C. for 20 years, from 72 to 92. And then when my oldest son got ready to go into the 4th grade, we decided we need to go to a jurisdiction where we thought the school systems were a little better. We were sending he and his younger brother to a Catholic school, and it was out in Maryland. So I was chauffeuring them from Maryland to D.C. I mean, going out to Maryland. Then by the time I do that, it was just so much rush, running around and all like that. And so we said, heck, if we got to do this for this many years until they graduate from high school, we might as well just move into a jurisdiction where we can send them to a public school.
So did you come to Prince William
County? We came to
then?
Fairfax County.
Fairfax first.
We in Fairfax from 92 to 2004, when this young one graduated from Lake Braddock. We moved to Prince William County. We've been here since 2004, and we really loved it.
So 9 years, you're just a baby.
Just a baby, yeah. I wish we had moved here sooner. I would have been that much further along, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great place to live, isn't it, really?
One thing I like about it is that it's just what I like in terms of it being semi-rural, and then it has a I wouldn't use the word urban, but it has a nice suburban feel to it where you feel like you can stretch out and it's not congested here and all. I like that.
You do real estate?
Well, I did that in D.C. from 78 to about the early 2000, around 2003 or 2004. I got out of that.
And now you work for First Home Alliance.
Well, I'm the chairman of the board of First Home Alliance, which is a volunteer, non-paid organization. Yeah, as they say, my day job that pays the bills is in the federal government. I work for the General Services Administration.
Oh, I see. Well, tell me about the First Home Alliance, because I find that interesting.
Well, First Home Alliance was created about 10 years ago by Larry Laws, and his main concern was trying to help people become homeowners. And I think his main forte, what they wanted to do was to be like a full-service provider of housing and helping people with their finances and things like that. But then as the mortgage crisis became a problem, I would say back in really probably around 2005 and 6, when it was beginning to hit.
That's about right.
Yeah. He decided to switch into trying to save people from losing their homes because of his background. He grew up relatively poor, and I think it was I'm not sure whether it's Alabama, but he's very committed towards helping people of lower and moderate income means and anybody, helping them save their house.
I wonder really how many people who are community-minded come from low-income backgrounds, because I think we all feel like there's something we can do to help someone else who might be in those same circumstances.
Well, what got me into being attracted to First Home Alliance is that when I was in D.C., my clientele was primarily first-time home buyers. And many people thought they never could buy a house. And I had several tenants in my properties. I was a landlord also, and I had several tenants who used to pay me very good. And I said, paid me very timely. And I said, oh, you could I said, have you ever thought about buying a house? And they said, oh, no, Mr. Scoggins, I don't think I can, they didn't think they could afford it or anything like that. And so back at that time, it was easier to get a mortgage, and they had it so that they had a program in D.C. called the Housing Purchase Assistance Program, whereby they would help you. Maybe they would give you it wasn't a gift, but it was just like they call it a silent mortgage, whereby you would be granted maybe a $10,000 or $15,000 down payment assistance, and it will be like a second to the mortgage that you get from a conventional lender. And I almost got a high out of that, because people who you help who didn't think they could buy a house, and some of them had impaired credit, and I had to wind up being a credit fixer-upper, because I had to call. A lot of them didn't know, they weren't they weren't versed on calling the company and trying to get things worked
Yeah.
out and all that. So I was almost like doing every little thing, and I enjoyed it, even though it was time consuming and can be frustrated. But I found at the end, if they could get a house, I felt I felt very pleased about that.
And so you're still essentially doing the same thing, only now as a board member? Is that?
Well, yes, I'm a board member, and what we do is we try to, we're HUD approved. We're HUD approved and everything, so that we are a HUD approved housing counselor, and we try to help people who are, if they're upside down with their mortgage, or if they have a mortgage that the interest rate is sort of onerous, we do what they call helping with loan modifications. We help modify their mortgages.
And is that a government-funded program?
Well,
or?
it's not government fund. Actually, it's sort of like it's a program we rely on donations primarily, but we do get some grants from very modest grants from HUD.
And so, how do you get your donations? Do
We are approved through United Way and also
Oh.
the Virginia's equivalent to that. You know, we're approved nonprofit organizations. People can make contributions, and we'll take any kind of contributions people want to make. One other thing I would say, and I can't say this more strongly. See, Larry is a retired military person, so most of his, he has a retirement coming from that, so he really doesn't take much out of the organization. Most of all this goes just right back to the organization through paying rent and paying a salary of someone on staff and some other things.
Well, tell me about some of the other things you do, because I know you're active in a lot of things.
Well, I'll tell you what, I became active. I'll tell you what, the thing that really attracted me to being active in the community was when I was in Pittsburgh. I was working on my master's at the University of Pittsburgh, and I had a part-time job which became a full-time job. I was the associate director of an organization called Neighborhood Housing Services, and the purpose of the program was to try to bring houses up to code standards. This was in around 1968 and 1970, and this one street in Pittsburgh on North Side, it was a pretty deteriorated street, and we thought that what we wanted to do was to make an impact rather than go helter skelter. We said, well, we'll try to do it block by block.
One block at a time.
At a time, yeah. So then we got the names of all the homeowners. We tried to meet with all the homeowners. And some of them were cooperative and some of them weren't cooperative, in terms of, they would think that, well, it wasn't a government program. This was an organization whose funding came from local savings and loans. That's where the money for the salaries came from them. And then the monies for the loans and everything came from the actual lending institutions. They would make low interest rate loans. But what happened was I found out that if you weren't to get things done, you have to be active. You have to know who the players are. And many people didn't know who the players were. And I got a high again out of seeing I can help someone. And one of the biggest, I would say one of the most rewarding things in my life was that working with this program. We had a lady who was an elderly lady, and they said she was recluse. She was sort of like the holdout on the block in terms of improving things. She didn't go to the meetings. She wasn't interested.
Sure.
And so when I got there, they told me about this lady, and so they said, well, if you can get her to cooperate, you really done something. That's what they say. And so I said, oh, is that right? And so I remember, since I was single, I was about like 21 or 22 years old, didn't have anything to do. You know how it is when you're real young. You don't.
I vaguely remember.
Vaguely. Well, I didn't have, I wasn't a carouser. I didn't go out and party and all that other stuff. So I just like to improve things, because my background was in architecture. So I'm one of these people that like to see things made pretty, like them. And so then they talked about this lady who they couldn't get to do anything. So then I remember one not late evening, but evening after work, she was coming up the hill from grocery store.
Because in Pittsburgh, they're all hills.
Hills, right. Yeah. She was coming up the hill from the grocery store, and she was an older lady. She had these bow legs and everything, and she was walking with these two grocery bags, just walking up the street. And so then I saw her, and I quickly ran up behind her. I forgot what her name was, but I said, "Can I help you with those groceries? Can I help you?" She said, "No, I don't need any help." But now I could see she really probably should have some help, even though she said she didn't need help. I said, "Well, I'll go ahead and help you. It's not, And so I said, "You remember me? I was the guy who works with Neighborhood Housing Service," because she used to when I would go to her door to knock on the door to see about getting some help, she would be upstairs. She would raise the window, say who it is, and I don't want any, you know. So then anyway, when I saw her, she hardly ever came out of her house. So when I saw her coming, so anyway, I got the grocery bags. I went to her, you know, walked up the hill to her house and everything. And so then she said, "All right, okay." I was at the door. She said, "Okay, I'm free now." You know, so she said, "Thank you very much." You know, so I said, "You want me to help you bring them in?" "No, I don't need." So as she was opening up the door, she squeezed in, like she opened up the door just big enough for her to squeeze in, you know. And while she did that, she was kind of short, so I could see over her head, and I kind of looked through her place, you know, while she was squeezing, and the place looked like every newspaper in town.
She was a hoarder.
She was a hoarder.
Before they even were hoarders, she was a hoarder.
She was a hoarder, right? And so then of course she had 2 dogs, kind of mangy dogs, and so then one of the dogs, as she opened the door up, he stuck his head out just enough to sort of bark, and then I petted the dog. I said, "Oh, that's a nice dog." I said, "That's a nice dog," and just like that. And then she said, "You like my dog?" I said, "Yeah, it's a cute dog," you know, even though it wasn't cute. And so she said, "Okay." And she said, "You want to come in?" So she invited me in the house, and then I told her, I said, "You got a nice house here." You know, I said, "This could be really made nice." You know, so I was talking about the outside, because we got contributions from paint companies. They would contribute us the money. They would not money, but they contribute us to paint. Some of the paint they didn't need and everything, we would get. So then I was able to, make a long story short, I was able to talk her into agreeing to have her house scraped on the outside and repainted. And we got too bad, I don't know where it is, but we got a picture in the newspaper because of it, and it's, you know, made a little big write-up in the community section.
You know, that could really still be a valuable program. Habitat for Humanity does a program called A Brush with Kindness, but they can only do one house at a time. They have to get that house funded, and then when that's complete, then they have to raise funds for the next one. But the idea of doing a whole block at a time is intriguing. And in Prince William County, we have a huge and growing population of elderly that at some point they cannot take care of their homes anymore, and maybe they can't afford nursing homes, or maybe they just don't want to. They want to stay in their house.
Yeah, I don't blame them. Yeah.
So that's a really good idea. Do we have anything that you know of in Prince William County that addresses that?
I don't know of an organization. You mentioned Habitat, and then there's something called
Project Menda House.
Menda House, that may be something that's close to it. But one of the unique things about this program in Pittsburgh was that we got, like I said, this was like in the late 60s and early 70s, so it's kind of like a new thing. You didn't hear about much of this going on in the communities across the country. And this neighborhood housing service, it was so successful in that community that the Federal Home Loan Bank Board adopted it and took it national. So there's a neighborhood housing service all over the country. You know.
Well, it sounds like that should be a successful program.
It is very successful.
We have a Department of Neighborhood Services, but they don't do anything like that. They are
See,
primarily...
they're part of the government, yeah. See, they're part of the... They enforce, I guess, code enforcement and making sure that people's lawns are kept up and then weeds are not growing. But this program here where I was working with, they actually did improvements to people's homes and everything. And it was primarily code-related things. It wasn't like somebody who didn't like the way their kitchen was and they want to redo the kitchen. It was anything that related to code enforcement.
You know, I think one of the reasons that we don't have a lot of cohesiveness as a community is because at some point, maybe in the 70s or 80s, everyone started building decks on the back of their house.
Right.
Before that, we used to see everybody, they would be sitting on their front porch.
Right.
You come home from work and you speak to your neighbors, and then at some point, though, and then they started putting the garages around the side of the house. So now it's entirely possible you can live right next door to somebody for 20 years and never see them because they go into the garage, they go into their house, and they sit outside on the back of the deck, and so you never see them. So I wonder if there might not be some potential for a program to, especially in older communities like Woodbridge and Dale City, where the houses are beginning to deteriorate and they need some TLC, if we couldn't get some kind of funding for exterior repairs that would be conducive, you know, not just yes, things you need, like a new roof, and of course, but things like a front porch or a patio in the front.
Or helping to replace some windows and things like that, drafty windows. I would think that would be very good in a place like Prince William County, especially, like you said, in the older communities and where their houses are closer together. They don't necessarily have to be townhomes, but the houses that are like off of, I'm trying to think of that street there, off of by Sheets, you go down that way where the houses are closer.
Around Hillendale?
Hillendale. I like that little community down there because the houses, I'm the kind of person that when I look at a house, I see what it can be versus what, if it's all run down, the better for me, because I like to go in and make things look nice, you know. So
Well, I think you should start that up.
yeah, well, yeah, well, maybe that's something to
Really?
look at if I had time. But I'm not. What is it? I'm not 21 or 22 years old anymore either. You know?
No, that just means we delegate more.
To delegate more. But you know, you get a tremendous amount of satisfaction out of helping people, and you see
Absolutely.
what you can do. You know, so that's, then you want to know how I got in, and I'll tell you what, how I got into. Want to talk about a little politics or what?
Sure.
How I got into politics is that, number one, when I was working with this program, we would meet the people the residents of the homes. Many of them were homeowners, elderly homeowners, and many of them were not elderly, but they were renters in the houses. And I just got, I was sort of mind-boggled by the nature of some people's dependency on the government. And some of them didn't mind being dependent on the government. And to me, being dependent on the government, I thought would be like, it's supposed to be the very last thing. I mean, even people, I grew up knowing people that would had problems, but they wouldn't think about going to the government for help. You know, they would just sort of struggle along. I remember we really weren't poor, but I remember sometimes in the evening when I was growing up, my father, we used to say, Dad, we're hungry, we want something to, you know, we want something to eat, like a hamburger, a hot dog, or something like that, you know, before you go to bed. He said, just brush your teeth and drink some water and go to bed, you know, because you get the mint from the toothpaste, sort of fills you up. For you, the next thing you know, you sleep, you know. So I'm just saying that if people who would just sort of use their own personal devices to sort of help out that a bit.
Like cardboard in the bottom of your shoe.
Yeah, right. That's cardboard at the bottom of your shoe. I'm trying to think of some other things, like if you need toothpaste, instead of spending a lot of money on toothpaste, even just get some salt and everything.
Or baking soda.
Baking soda, right?Use that.
I've been there.
Been there.
I absolutely have been there. Yeah.
Or if you need a drink, you get some water and squeeze a lemon in it, and then you take a little sugar and
Lemonade. Instant lemonade.
Yeah. So then, I mean, so what? I just thought it was. To me, I thought it would just sort of ruining people by making them so dependent. And so then, I don't need to tell you what party I kind of gravitate towards because of that, you know.
Well, it's more than just a problem. I mean, it's also a perception.
Perception.
And what I say is, I will always give you a hand up, but I don't want to give you a hand out.
Right.
And that's the way I feel. I don't want to just support somebody. I want to train somebody or teach somebody so that they can stand on their own 2 feet.
Right, and show them the way, you know, show them how they can do it, you know. It's just like in the federal government where I work now, we have this, you know, you've heard of probably the TSP. Have you heard of the TSP?
I don't think so.
It's called Thrift Savings Plan. It's sort of like the 401k type for federal workers, because back in the mid-'80s, they created a system called the Federal Service Retirement System, which is different than the Civil Service Retirement System, because the government is trying to spend less money on the federal retirees, so they made it so that the TSP is money that you put in, and the government matches a certain amount of it. So, you know, I advise a lot of young people, and even some people that are not so young, they have their money into TSP, and it's all into the G fund and the F fund, which is a fixed, and the government securities fund, and usually they're about the lowest yielding funds. You know, they pretty much mirror the interest rates that the banks are paying. Like, for example, I think the fixed fund is like 0.03%, a point some kind of percent, you know. And so I tell them you should be, you know, to be a little more educated about it, read up on some of the other funds, because all my monies are in the C and S fund, and I've been getting like 6 and 7, 8% a year, you know.
That's pretty good.
Yield, you know, average.
Especially in these times.
Yeah, in
that's
these
pretty
times,
good.
yeah, right. So, but I believe in education, number one. I think a lot of problems that people have is not because they are inept or just not capable. I just think they just lack information, you know.
Well, there seems to, I don't know, tell me how you feel about young people in general. I mean, young people take pretty bad rap about being, I don't know, smart or smart mouth or, but you hear, did you just read that article about the young man that walked 10 miles through the snow to get a job at a thrift store?
I didn't read that.
That was amazing.
Well,
and that should tell people that their perceptions are wrong. It's not, there may be some youth that are not ambitious, but you can't categorize
Well, I think it
anybody.
depends on where you go. You know, if you go to where, for an example, you go to some of the college campuses, and if you go to some of the, I would say that the people who are ambitious, if you look at some of these neighborhood, some of these, I would say, community organizations that some of the young people are involved in, those are ambitious people. You know, it just depends on where you go. Now, if you look at the kid that's maybe hanging around on the street, or maybe they got their pants down to the ground, you know, the crouch and everything like that, then I wouldn't call that ambitious. But unfortunately, some of those individuals you just have to kind of forget, you know, and just concentrate on those who are willing to improve their lives or want to do what I would call as an honorable thing and be an example to the community. Because when I was in the military, I went to a military high school. I graduated from military high school, and then I went to college on the ROTC. And one of the first things they tell you as a military person, as a military officer, the key thing is to set the example. And that's what I feel you should always do, is try to set the example. You know.
A few years back, I saw a study in D.C., a young woman who came from a broken home. Her mother had been incarcerated. Her brother had been prosecuted for murder, and yet this young woman was making straight A's in school and earned a scholarship. And they were doing a study to try to determine what made her excel. And I thought, well, isn't that something to think about? That, you know, what... Because that's a common theme, is that, well, they had a terrible childhood or they lived a terrible life, and so it's understandable, and people commit crimes and they blame it on their circumstances. But there are people that excel, and sometimes some of them, the worse things are, the better they get.
Yeah. Well, I think that in that particular sense, I think sometimes it just depends on those individuals having either a role model, or either they may have a mentor, somebody who sees something in them, or either, this may sound kind of very amateurish, but I remember, and I'm just talking about myself, and I remember when I was in grade school, that when we did, especially around the holidays, if you did your homework and you got everything right, this, like around Thanksgiving, this teacher would put a little turkey sticker on your thing, and around Christmas time you put a little Santa Claus sticker, you know, the things. I mean, then during the year, if you did right, you got a little star, you know, you got a gold star, and you can go up and they have it on a bulletin board, your name, and it was almost the thing to see who can get the most stars, you know.
And yet kids get rewarded today hugely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do well, you get a new Wii, or you get a new iPhone. Yeah,
Wii. Yeah, do we? Okay.